Some objects don't stay where you leave them. They wait. Quiet. Patient. Listening. Every object holds a story. But some stories refuse to stay still. Welcome to Tales Atelier, where the things we keep eventually keep us.
I didn't think much of it at first. Another day, another junk mail. But when I reached into my mailbox that night, my fingers brushed something cold and smooth instead of paper. A single silver key lay at the bottom. No envelope, no tag, nothing. The hallway light was weak and flickery, so the metal almost glowed. I thought it must have slipped from somebody's bundle. People in my building juggle bills, grocery bags, toddlers. Mistakes happen. Still, I turned it over in my palm. Worn edges. Scratches like it had been on someone's ring for years. And one detail that snagged in my brain, a faintly etched R near the base. I set it on the kitchen counter that night, right next to loose change and crumpled receipts. By morning, I'd almost forgotten about it. But at 12:17 a.m., just as I was drifting toward sleep, I heard it. A soft clink echoing through the hall outside my apartment. Not a knock, not a footstep. The unmistakable sound of something metallic sliding into a slot. My chest tightened. Barefoot, I padded to the door and peered through the peephole. Empty hallway, just shadows cast by the exit sign. I opened the door anyway. The draft smelled faintly of rain. I glanced down at the mail slots. The key was back in my mailbox. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I never removed it. Maybe I imagined carrying it inside. But it was still sitting on my counter too. Dull and waiting. Now, there were two. I picked them up together. Identical weight. Same cool surface against my palm. Same etched with the letter R. Sleep. Impossible. I kept both keys on my nightstand, within reach, like they might whisper answers if I stared long enough. All they offered was silence. The next morning, heading to work, I slipped them both into the drawer by the door, the one where spare batteries and useless receipts go to die. Out of sight, out of mind. When I came home that evening, the drawer was empty. I froze in the doorway, bag slipping from my shoulder. I knew exactly how many keys had been there. 2, side by side. Now the drawer held only dust and a faint impression where metal had lain. And waiting for me, tucked neatly into my mailbox again, was a single silver key. That's the moment I stopped telling myself it was coincidence. Something, or someone, wanted this key in my life. I just didn't know yet that it wasn't a spare. It was an invitation. The second time I found the key, I didn't touch it right away. It sat there in the mailbox like it had been waiting all day, catching the yellow hallway light and throwing it back at me. Same scratches. Same faint R. I told myself it was a prank. Some kid slipping duplicates in my slot for fun. People in my building barely make eye contact, but sure, maybe someone had time for games. I even asked Mrs. Collins from 3B if she'd noticed anyone hanging around the mailboxes. She waved her phone at me like proof. No one uses those old things anymore. Bills, rent, all online, dear. I laughed it off, but the sound came out thin, because deep down, I already knew this wasn't a prank. It wasn't trying to scare me, it was trying to stay close. That night, I snapped. I grabbed the key, shoved my shoes on, and stalked into the rain-slick street. At the corner, the gutter hissed with runoff. I crouched, pitched the key into the drain, and listened. The faintest clang, then silence. Gone. Good riddance, I muttered. My voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. I slept like a rock that night, dreaming of clean drawers and empty mailboxes. When I opened my door the next morning, it was waiting, perfectly centered on my doormat, a single bead of water trembling on its surface like it had just been washed. My heart started hammering. I snatched it up, and for the first time I saw the engraving clearly. It wasn't a scratch, it was deliberate. The letter R, sharp, intentioned, personal. I thought about the names in my building. Rivera in 3C, Reza in 5A, Rourke, who never answered his door. But none of them made sense. None fit the way this thing seemed to orbit me. Then it hit me. My mother's maiden name started with R. I didn't want that connection. Didn't want to think the key had any reason to come here because of her. That evening, I made sure it was over. I dropped the key down the trash chute, waited until I heard it clang deep below, final, satisfying. But when I came home the next night, there were two identical silver keys gleaming in the mailbox, side by side, aligned perfectly, like they'd been placed with care. I just stood there, arms full of groceries, skin prickling, staring. No fear left, just disbelief so heavy it made me cold. Whoever, whatever, was doing this didn't care that I'd tried to get rid of them. It wanted me to understand something. 2 keys. Both engraved, both mine now, whether I wanted them or not. And that's when the thought hit me, the one I'd been avoiding. Keys exist for locks, and these weren't random. Somewhere out there, something was waiting for me to find where they fit. And I had the terrible feeling it already knew I would. By then, I carried the keys everywhere. Not because I trusted them, but because I didn't trust what would happen if I didn't. They clinked faintly in my pocket, louder than they should have been, like they wanted to remind me they were still there. Each morning, I'd check the drawer, the counter, the mailbox. Nothing. Until I left for work. Then I'd hear that faint, metallic chime behind me. Soft, deliberate. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was presence. One evening, the elevator coughed and groaned its way up to my floor, and then overshot it. The panel flickered. The doors opened to a level I'd never seen before. Roof access. My building didn't have a rooftop for residents. Not officially, just a maintenance door chained shut, old and rusted. But that night, it waited open a few inches, like it had been expecting me. A single padlock hung loose on the chain, its metal orange with rust. The keyhole was wide, old-fashioned. My throat went dry. You already know what I did. I slid one of the silver keys into it. It fit. Not perfectly. It caught halfway, but it turned enough to make the chain rattle like a warning. I yanked it free and stumbled back into the elevator before the doors hissed closed. For the rest of the night, I couldn't stop replaying that sound, the click, the half-turn, that moment of almost. It wasn't random anymore. It wasn't coincidence. The keys were leading me somewhere. But where? And why me? The next day, I tested them again. Mailboxes, utility closets, storage cages in the basement, even the service door that never opened without a code. None worked. But the elevator, that damn elevator, kept humming differently every time I stepped inside, like it was breathing. That evening, when I came home, something new waited for me. 4 keys this time, not 2. 4 identical slivers of metal, gleaming in the mailbox, stacked perfectly. My palms went slick as I gathered them. Their weight felt wrong, heavier. I laid them side by side on the counter. 2 had the same faint R, The other two had sharper engravings. RD. My name didn't have those initials, but they sounded familiar in a way that made my stomach knot. That night, I dreamed of stairs that didn't end, hallways looping up toward a sky, filled with chalk marks, stars, arrows, scribbles, symbols I used to draw as a kid. Every door I opened in the dream led to another, each one humming with that same sound, the half-turn of a lock trying to open. When I woke, I was gripping one of the keys so tight it had left an imprint in my palm. I didn't need to question it anymore. Something, or someone, wanted me at that rooftop door. And I already knew I'd go, because no matter how far I threw them, the keys always found their way back. I told myself I was only going up there to end it, to prove nothing waited behind that door. But deep down, I knew better. The rooftop wasn't calling. It was inviting. When the elevator reached my floor, I pressed the roof access button. It didn't light up. I pressed again. Nothing. The panel flickered once, then groaned like an old throat clearing itself. A red light blinked. The elevator jerked upward on its own. The doors opened with a long, reluctant hiss. There it was, the same chain, same rusted padlock, waiting. My pocket felt heavy with metal. The first key, the plain R, slid in, turned halfway, stopped. The second one caught even sooner. Sweat slicked my palms. Then I tried the one marked RD. The turn was smooth this time. One clean, perfect click. The chain slumped loose, and the padlock hit the floor with a metallic sigh. The door creaked open, spilling cold night air into the stairwell. The city spread out below me in a web of neon veins. The rooftop was patchwork, tar, gravel, bricks, and something else. Chalk. Childish chalk drawings, old and weathered, sprawled across the roof. Stars, circles, crooked arrows, half-faded words, and a thin trail of them led across the roof toward the far wall. Each crunch of gravel under my shoes echoed too loudly. When I reached the wall, something fluttered there, a single sheet of paper, taped in place. I peeled it free, with trembling fingers. Shaky handwriting pressed deep into the page. For whoever finds this, please don't be afraid. The ink had run in places, smudged by rain, but the message was still clear. Someone had been here. Someone had left this for me. I crouched and traced one of the chalk stars with my fingertip. The dust clung to my skin, faint and blue. It was a crude 5-point star, imperfect, messy, and for some reason, heartbreakingly familiar. When I was a kid, I used to draw the same pattern on sidewalks, with broken chalk pieces. My mom used to laugh, saying, "You always draw stars when you're scared." The memory hit me like a gust of wind. Speaking of wind, it picked up just then, rushing sharp and cold around me. My jacket snapped behind me, and in the wind, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the city. A laugh. Soft, light, not mocking, not cruel. Almost relieved. I spun around, scanning every corner of the roof. Nothing. Just the hum of the city below, and the whisper of the breeze. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever RD was, they weren't trying to scare me. They were guiding me, maybe even welcoming me. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it into my pocket with the keys, and took one last look at the stars drawn across the gravel. The arrows pointed back toward the door. I followed them, each step softer now. As the elevator carried me down, I could still feel the chill of the rooftop air on my skin. Whoever had left that message, Whoever had drawn those stars had done it for a reason. And somewhere deep down, past the fear and the noise, I felt the first trace of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity. Who was RD? And why did it feel like I was just walking the path they left behind? I told myself I wouldn't go back. At whatever I'd found up there, chalk drawings, paper, a whisper in the wind, was enough. But all the next day, I couldn't focus. My hands kept brushing the keys in my pocket, like they had their own pulse. By nightfall, I was already in the elevator. The roof access light glowed on its own before I even touched it. My reflection in the metal door looked pale, expectant, like someone who'd already decided to say yes. When the doors opened, the chain was gone, the padlock too. The rooftop door swung inward without resistance. The chalk drawings were still there, but now, new ones had appeared. Bold white arrows led straight toward the far wall again, where another paper fluttered in the breeze. I tore it free and held it close. The handwriting was the same, uneven, hurried, alive.
Welcome back.
My chest tightened. The wind carried the faint scent of rain. I looked around, half expecting someone to step from behind the vent, but the roof was empty. The city hummed below like white noise. When I came back the next night, because of course I did, there was another note.
This was my escape. The city feels smaller up here. Safer.
The following night, another note waited.
If the key found you, it means you need this too.
I stood there for a long time, reading those lines over and over. I began to leave replies, at first, short ones. Who are you, and why me? The next evening, a new message waited, taped right below my reply.
Doesn't matter who I was. What matters is you found this place.
That's when it changed. It didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt shared. A private corner of the world, a secret between me and whoever had come before. Every night became a ritual. I'd climb the stairs, trace the chalk symbols, unfold the newest note. Sometimes I'd leave my own, a drawing, a fragment of thought, words I'd never said aloud in months. And somehow, they always replied. The chalk lines shifted subtly each night, new marks woven into the old ones. Once, a small smiley face appeared near the door, drawn in fresh blue chalk. I laughed out loud for the first time in weeks. It echoed against the walls, and didn't sound lonely. I started bringing things up there, a thermos, a blanket, a notebook. I'd sit with the wind and write while the city pulsed below. Sometimes, when the night was still enough, I could swear the chalk shimmered faintly, as if someone else's hand was tracing over mine. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like a connection. Like whoever RD was, they hadn't left. They'd just changed shape. One night, I left a question that had been eating at me for days. What do you want me to do with the key? The next evening, the answer was waiting.
Keep it. The rooftop is yours now.
The words hit harder than they should have. I read them again and again until they blurred. The wind rose, carrying dust and chalk flecks into the air. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was intruding. I felt trusted. Whoever RD had been, they weren't haunting me. They were handing me something precious. The key had found me for a reason. And now, so had this place. Tomorrow night, I decided, I'd bring a new piece of chalk. And maybe, I'd finally add something of my own. The night I found the last note, the city felt still. Like the streets had exhaled and were holding that breath, waiting. The sky was sharp and clear, stars cutting through the light haze above the rooftops. I took the elevator up one last time. No button pressing needed. It knew. The keys jingled faintly in my pocket, warm from my hand. When the doors opened, the air hit me like memory, cold, electric, familiar. The arrows of chalk glowed under the moonlight, brighter than before. Each line pointed to the far wall, and taped there, gently flapping, was one final note. I peeled it free carefully. The handwriting was the same, hurried, uneven, but softer somehow.
If the key found you, it's because you needed it. Don't be afraid. Keep it. The rooftop is yours now.
The words blurred for a moment as my eyes stung. It wasn't fear this time. It was something quieter. Relief, grief, recognition. Whoever RD had been, they weren't here anymore. But they had left this open sky, this refuge, for whoever needed to feel a little less locked inside their life. I sat down on the gravel, back pressed against the brick wall, the note folded in my lap. The hum of traffic below faded to a soft pulse, the kind of sound you stop hearing once you feel safe. For a long time, I just breathed. The air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of rain and dust. My chest expanded fully for the first time in months. I didn't even realize I'd forgotten how that felt. When I looked up, the stars didn't seem so far. I pulled the piece of chalk from my jacket pocket, the one I'd brought tonight. The stub was worn down to my fingertips. I crouched and drew a small, crooked star beside the others. It wasn't perfect. The lines wobbled, but it was mine. My addition to the map of whoever came before, and whoever might come after. When I stepped back, the chalk lines shimmered faintly, just for a second, like they were acknowledging me. The 4 keys jingled in my hand. 2 etched R, 2 RD. They caught the moonlight, flashing white, then fading again. They didn't feel heavy anymore. They didn't feel cursed. They felt like proof. Proof that someone else had once needed the same quiet I did. Someone else had found it. And now, somehow, I had too. Before I left, I slipped 1 key back into my mailbox. Just one. The same way it had found me. Not as a warning, as an invitation. Maybe someone else would find it when they needed to. Maybe they'd follow the same trail of arrows and stars, and end up standing here, breathing the same air. The idea made me smile. Downstairs, my apartment felt lighter. The silence didn't press anymore. It listened. I kept the remaining 3 keys on my ring. Their weight was comforting now. A quiet reminder that there are locks you don't have to open alone. Whenever the city feels too tight, I know where to go. Up, always up. Until the world hums soft again, and the sky feels wide enough to hold me. Not all hauntings are cruel. Some are kindnesses that never found a home. And under that wide night sky, chalk dust still on my fingertips, I realized what RD had really left behind. Not mystery, not fear, but a way out, for anyone who needed it. I whispered it to the wind, half laughing through tears. Thank you. The rooftop swallowed the words whole, warm and gentle. And for the first time in years, I don't feel alone anymore.
Every story takes time, and so does listening. Thank you for giving us yours. We're just starting out at Tales Atelier. If you can comment, or subscribe, it helps us a lot. Alright, back to the story we go.
After midnight, the movie had become nothing but flicker and noise. The 4 of them, Reese, Mila, Kit, and Sam sat half asleep in the pale glow, drained cans scattered across the carpet. Silence lingered too long. Reese broke it with a nervous laugh. "Let's check the attic." Mila groaned but grabbed her phone. "Seriously?" Reese shrugged. Better than watching credits. The idea felt harmless, just movement to fill the stillness. They climbed single file up the narrow stairs, socks whispering against cold wood. Each step moaned like a warning. When Kit forced the hatch, stale air spilled down, thick with dust and cedar. The flashlight beams cut through floating particles that looked alive. The attic waited above them, quiet, swollen with the smell of forgotten summers and boxes too heavy to open. They emerged into heat and stillness. Old trunks lined the walls, draped with yellowed sheets. A rocking horse stood near the window, its painted eye staring blankly. Reese swung her light across the floor, tracing odd shapes that warped with every breath. Then the beam caught a plain wooden box pushed into the far corner. Unmarked, brass latch, dulled with time. Kit smiled uneasily. "Treasure?" Reese crouched, heart hammering. The latch resisted, then released with a sigh that sounded almost human. Inside lay a board carved from dark wood, bone-white dice, and 4 pewter tokens glinting dully in the beam. Beneath them, a folded sheet of paper waited like an invitation. Reese picked up a token and froze. It had sneakers and a ponytail just like hers. The others leaned closer, frowning. The next token wore Sam's bracelet. Another carried Mila's cropped hair silhouette. The last bore Kit's silver ring. The likeness was too perfect. "Is this a joke?" Sam whispered. No one answered. The board beneath them was etched with a spiral, lines curling inward toward a blank center. No title, no numbers, just a path disappearing into nothing. Reese unfolded the paper. At first it seemed empty, then faint letters bled upward as light hit the surface.
"Welcome, players."
Kit forced a laugh that cracked halfway through. "Okay, creepy." The next line formed as if written by an invisible hand.
"Choose your tokens."
The air grew heavier, pressing them into silence. Something in the rafters shifted softly, like breath. Ink thickened across the page.
"All 4 must play. No substitutes."
Outlines appeared in each corner of the board, shapes matching their tokens perfectly. Reese tried to place hers elsewhere. It slid on its own into the correct slot. Mila's flashlight flickered. The paper pulsed again, new words rising slowly.
"Rounds continue until the center is reached."
"What's in the center?" Kit asked. The answer surfaced instantly.
"Winner claims release."
They exchanged uncertain looks. Behind them, fabric rustled. The coats hanging from a rack moved, though no air stirred. The beam shook in Reese's hand. The token in her palm warmed, clinging to her skin as if it wanted to stay. The letters brightened until they carved themselves deeper.
"Roll to begin, Reese."
Everyone froze. None of them had said her name. Mila's phone buzzed once, screen flashing, then died mid-glow. The attic seemed to separate from the house below. Sound thinned to nothing. The dice rolled forward by themselves, stopping at the center of the board. Waiting. "Don't," Kit whispered, but Reese couldn't resist. She touched the dice. They were warm, alive. They tumbled once, twice, then halted. The attic hatch slammed shut below them, latch locking from the outside. 9. Her token slid forward 9 spaces, with a dry scrape. New words appeared, bleeding through the paper.
"Dare. Open the closet."
They all turned slowly towards the old wooden wardrobe at the corner, and on its cracked mirror, They saw 5 reflections instead of 4. The attic felt heavier now, the air thick like syrup. The words on the page pulsed.
Dare, open the closet.
No one moved. The wardrobe loomed in the corner, its mirror cracked into a spiderweb of light. Reese swallowed hard and crossed the floor. Her hand trembled as she turned the handle. Only coats, only dust. Still, the board glowed faintly.
Success. Next turn.
The dice rolled by themselves toward Mila. Mila stared at them like they might bite. Fine, she whispered, and tossed them. 5. Her token slid forward, the scraping sound too human. New letters bled through the paper.
Dare. Remove the light.
Before anyone could react, the bulbs winked out, one by one. The attic drowned in darkness, leaving only thin light from Mila's dying phone screen. Their faces turned pale blue, the board spiral faintly alive beneath it. A low hum filled the air, like wires vibrating in the walls. Kit's flashlight flickered, then failed. The dice rattled softly, rolling toward her. 2. Her token crept forward and stopped. The words shimmered again.
Dare. Give something away.
She frowned, whispering, Give what? The paper burned brighter, new letters etching across.
Blood.
Her scream was sharp and small when the dice scorched her palm. A single bead of blood slid from her thumb and dropped onto the spiral. The board absorbed it greedily, the glow pulsing red, then pale again.
Success.
The attic seemed to sigh with satisfaction. Reese's breath caught. We're not playing this, she said. No one answered. The dice rolled again, slow, deliberate, stopping in front of Sam. Sam hesitated, then threw. 3. Her token scraped forward with a metallic rasp.
Dare. Count your friends.
They tried to laugh. There's 4 of us, Sam said. The paper didn't move. A line reformed. Sharp and wet-looking.
Count again.
The laughter died. Reese whispered. 1, 2, 3, 4. A breath touched the back of her neck. 5. The attic froze. The 5th breath lingered, damp and steady. Kit turned, flashlight beam trembling, but nothing waited there. Nothing visible. The page gleamed.
Success.
Then another line, final and clean.
Final dare. Leave before the 3rd chime.
The clock downstairs began ticking louder, each sound syncing with their hearts. Mila's voice cracked. 3rd chime of what? No answer came. The dice rolled off the board, clattering across the floor. They spun longer than physics allowed, circling like insects around prey. Then the 1st chime rang out, deep and hollow, shaking dust from the beams. Reese grabbed the attic latch. It didn't move. The metal was cold, sweating beneath her fingers. Kit threw her shoulder against it. The hatch didn't budge. The 2nd chime rolled through the house, louder, closer. The spiral brightened, each token sliding inward. Shadows climbed the walls like tidewater, splitting into shapes that didn't belong to them. Sam screamed. The board flared white.
Time running out.
Reese's token vibrated, inching toward the center. She snatched it, wrenching it free. The wood shrieked in protest, a grinding of metal against bone. The glow faltered, stuttering like a dying pulse. Now, she shouted. Kit hit the hatch again. Wood splintered. A sliver of cold air broke through, smelling like rain and freedom. The third chime struck as they fell through the opening. The sound tore through them, heavy enough to rattle teeth. They crashed onto the hallway floor, gasping, covered in dust. The attic door slammed shut above them, the lock sliding home on its own. Every light in the house came back on. For a heartbeat, everything looked normal. But the clock kept ticking, and upstairs, the floor creaked once. Like applause for a game well played. Morning came, pale and cold. The four of them sat in the hallway where they'd fallen, too afraid to move. No one spoke about the game. No one mentioned the fifth reflection. When the clock downstairs chimed once, they flinched together. Reese stood first. "It's done," she said. Mila nodded too quickly, clutching her phone like a charm, but even then, the silence in the attic above felt alive. When Reese finally gathered courage to climb back up, daylight poured through the cracked window. The attic looked untouched. No board, no box, no dice, only the rocking horse, staring at the floor. The boards beneath where they'd sat were spotless, as though something had burned away every trace. Yet the smell of cedar lingered, sharp, sweet, and wrong. By that evening, Mila's message blinked onto their group chat. "We shouldn't have touched it." Before anyone could reply, it vanished. When Reese tried calling, she heard soft static, the faint sound of dice tumbling endlessly. Then a voice not Mila's, not anyone's, whispered through the line.
"Your turn."
The call dropped. The silence afterward felt like a closed door. A week later, Kit told Reese she'd seen the box again. It had been sitting neatly on her porch at dawn, latch shining like it had just been polished. When she blinked, it was gone. That night, footsteps echoed above her ceiling. Her apartment didn't have an attic. By morning, she'd packed her things and left town without saying goodbye. Sam lasted longest. She stopped talking about it, stopped answering texts. Then her profile photo disappeared, replaced by static gray. Reese thought she'd finally escaped, until a new folder appeared on her phone gallery labeled Game_Night. Inside were 3 photos. The attic, the board glowing faintly, and the final one, Reese's token missing from its square. Days blurred into weeks. Reese began hearing the chimes everywhere, inside elevators, in traffic, even under her breath when she was alone. Always 3 notes, slow and final. She tried to tell herself it was memory, trauma replaying as sound. But one night, when the 3rd note struck, her bedroom clock was unplugged. She started dreaming of the spiral. In the dream, it never ended. Each rotation pulled tighter, smaller, until it disappeared into a single black dot. Something inside that darkness breathed.
"You didn't finish,"
it whispered. When Reese woke, the scent of cedar filled the room, faint but unmistakable. Months later, a faint scrape woke her at 3 a.m. She sat up, heart hammering, eyes fixed on her closet door. The sound came again. Wood on wood. When she turned on the lamp, the wooden box sat quietly at her feet, brass latch gleaming in the light. It hadn't aged a day. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a single pewter. Sneakers, ponytail, hers. The rest of the pieces were gone, along with the dice and the paper. But when she touched the token, it pulsed once, warm, deliberate, like a heartbeat inside metal. Downstairs, the clock began to chime once, twice, Before the third chime, Reese whispered, "I know." The air thickened, trembling like something holding breath. A soft laugh echoed from somewhere above, childlike, echoing off invisible rafters. The light flickered, shadows spinning into a spiral. When the third strike rang out, the box clicked shut by itself. And in the silence that followed, the house exhaled, ready for its next players.
It slipped out of my bag when I dropped it onto the couch. A sliver of something sharp clinking against the hardwood floor. At first I thought it was glass from a broken bottle. But when I bent down, I saw it was a shard of mirror. Thin, irregular, edges dulled just enough not to cut. It was no bigger than my palm, shaped like a crooked diamond. I turned it over in my hand, frowning. I didn't own a mirror like this. The surface was cloudy at first, smudged from whatever corner of my bag it had been hiding in. I wiped it against my sleeve. That's when the light caught and I froze. It didn't show me. Not my reflection. Not my apartment's peeling wallpaper. Not my tired face or messy hair. The shard reflected a dimly lit room I had never seen before. The angle was odd, as though I were peering through a window. There was a table, a ceramic cup sitting on it. Steam rose in slow curls from the liquid inside. I blinked hard, then turned the shard over, expecting the illusion to vanish. On the back was nothing but dull, rough silver. When I flipped it back, the cup was still there, steam drifting like a slow breath. I set it down quickly, pulse thrumming in my ears. I'd had a long week, overwork, not enough sleep. My mind could play tricks, couldn't it? I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and deliberately ignored the shard lying on the couch. But the thought pressed at me, insistent. What room was that? Who was drinking from that cup? Later that night, after brushing my teeth, I couldn't resist. I picked it up again. The cup was gone now. In its place was an open book on the same table, pages fluttering as if stirred by a breeze. The hair on my arms prickled. I tilted the shard, angled it, even held it up to the bathroom mirror to compare. My bathroom showed me my face, my tired eyes. The shard showed something else, somewhere else. A place that felt lived in, quiet, waiting. I dropped it into the drawer of my nightstand, shoved it closed, and crawled into bed. But in the dark, with my head on the pillow, I swore I heard it. The faint scrape of a chair being pulled back. Not in my apartment. In the room on the other side of the mirror. The next morning, I half expected the shard to be gone. Just some fragment my brain had invented out of exhaustion. But when I opened the nightstand drawer, it lay exactly where I'd left it. Waiting. The surface had cleared overnight. No dust. No fingerprints. No smudges. Almost inviting. I lifted it gingerly and tilted it toward the window. The shard brightened instantly, as though it craved light. And again reflected, not me. Instead, the same dim room. A lamp burned low in the corner, the shade tilted at an angle. On the table, yesterday's book was still open, but now it had been turned to another page. I leaned closer, squinting, trying to make out the words. They were too small, too blurred. The air in my apartment felt still, heavy, as though holding its breath. And then something shifted in the shard. A pale hand entered the reflection, turning the page with slow, deliberate care. The fingers were long, clean, the nails bitten down. I gasped, nearly dropping the shard. The book stayed open. The hand was gone. For a long time, I sat there frozen, staring, waiting for something else to appear. Nothing. Just the lamp, the book, the table. An empty room that was not mine. The day passed in a haze. I carried the shard in my bag again, though I couldn't explain why. At work, while colleagues droned about deadlines, my thoughts returned to it. Was it a hallucination? A projection from some ad gimmick? Or maybe something even worse? That night, I caved. Sitting on my couch, the city noise muffled by rain against the window. I held the shard up again. This time, the room showed a mug steaming on the table. The hand appeared again, wrapping around it, lifting it toward unseen lips. A faint curl of steam fogged the shard's surface, as though the warmth traveled across. I jerked back, breath caught in my throat. My couch was cold. My apartment was silent. But in the reflection, someone sat in their quiet little room, sipping tea. The shard quivered faintly in my hand, like it had pulsed with the heartbeat of another place. I didn't know who they were, or where they were. All I knew was that the shard was not showing me. Not my reflection. Not my life. Someone else's. And I had the awful, exhilarating feeling they might be able to see me too. For 2 nights, I told myself I'd leave the shard shut away. 2 nights of lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for the faint scrape of chairs, the muffled thump of a book closing in a room I'd never entered. On the 3rd night, I gave in. The shard was cool in my hand, edges pressing into my palm. When I angled it toward the lamplight, the room appeared again. Same table, same book. A sketch now lay beside it. Pencil lines rough but steady. Shapes I couldn't quite make out. My pulse quickened. The air around me felt heavier, as though leaning in. Then he appeared. Not just a hand this time, but a figure easing into the chair. A man, maybe mid-20s, hair falling into his face as he bent toward the sketch. He wore a sweater frayed at the cuffs, dark with age. His movements were ordinary, unhurried. I shouldn't have been able to see him. And then it happened. He looked up. Not in the casual way of someone glancing around their room. His gaze cut straight toward me. Toward the shard. I flinched, nearly dropping it. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a terrible instant, I thought I'd imagined it. But when I lifted the shard again, his eyes were still fixed, wide and startled. He mouthed something. Just one word. Hello. My throat locked. I clutched the shard tighter, breath shallow. He leaned forward, as if trying to get closer. His face sharpening into view. Tired eyes, pale skin. A scar running faintly across his left eyebrow. Not threatening. Just real. I whispered without thinking. Can you hear me? The shard fogged suddenly, as if a breath touched it from the other side. His head tilted. He frowned, lips moving again. Slower this time, deliberate. Hello. I dropped the shard onto the couch cushions. Scrambling back, my chest heaved. The cushions muffled its surface, and when I dared glance down, it showed nothing but my own ceiling again. I forced myself to leave it there, untouched, for the rest of the night. But sleep never came. My mind replayed his eyes. Surprised, searching, not hostile, just as unsettled as mine. By morning, I knew one thing with a certainty that chilled me more than the encounter itself. It hadn't been an accident. He had seen me too. I avoided the shard for an entire day. But avoidance didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like ignoring a door I already knew was open. That night, after pacing the apartment until my legs ached, I gave in. I lifted the shard with both hands, bracing myself. The man was there almost immediately. Same dim room. The lamp glowing low. He sat at the table again. But this time he wasn't sketching or reading. He was waiting. When his eyes met mine, my breath snagged. He didn't flinch this time. Instead, he reached for a notepad on the table and a stub of pencil. His hand moved quickly, dark lines dragging across paper. Then he lifted the page toward the shard. A single word, written in hurried strokes. Hello. I stared. Throat tight, heart clattering. It wasn't just coincidence. It wasn't just me imagining shapes on lips. He wanted to speak. My voice came out cracked. Hi. The shard didn't react, but the man's head tilted slightly, his brow furrowing as though straining to catch a sound. He wrote again, slower this time. Can you see me? My pulse thundered. I fumbled for a pen, any scrap of paper. Nothing seemed right, nothing seemed close enough to reach through. In desperation, I whispered again. Yes. I see you. The shard's surface fogged faintly, just for a heartbeat, as though he'd exhaled against the glass. His eyes widened. He scribbled furiously, flipping the page. Not alone. I swallowed hard. My apartment felt colder, darker, but also different. The silence no longer pressed so heavily. Someone else was sitting on the other side, someone real. The exchanges continued over the next few nights. Short words, quick sketches. He'd draw a steaming mug, lift the real one to his lips. I'd nod, smile nervously, trace my finger against the shard's edge. Once, I said quietly, "What's your name?" He hesitated, then wrote just 2 letters. E.R. I didn't press further. Somehow, the small fragments we shared, the curve of his letters, the way his hand lingered on the page before lifting it, were enough. But late one night, after another scribbled hello, I found myself whispering the thing I hadn't admitted to anyone in months. I don't want to be alone. He paused, his pencil stilled. Then, with a steady hand, he lit a candle on the table and placed it close to his side of the mirror shard. And in my darkened apartment, the shard seemed to glow warmer. The candlelight flickering softly against my wall. The candle became a ritual. Every night, when I lifted the shard, he would be there. Sometimes with tea, sometimes with a sketchbook balanced on his knees, but always with the candle burning at the edge of the table. A steady light, a small promise. It amazed me how quickly I came to rely on it. My days still felt heavy, dull, pressed down by the sameness of routine. But the nights carried a secret pulse, a tether to something beyond myself. We couldn't speak in full conversations. Not really. But we found ways. He'd draw a book, hold it up, then tilt his head. I'd whisper, "Yes, I read too." And he'd smile faintly, as though he'd caught the shape of the word through the glass. Sometimes he'd sketch stars, quick bursts of pencil strokes. Other times just write single words. Safe, light, still here. And though my apartment walls hadn't changed, though the city still pressed in with its noise and loneliness, the shard's glow felt like an open window, a space that belonged to us both. One evening, after a long day that left me bone-tired and hollow, I collapsed onto the couch and didn't bother turning on the lights. I almost didn't pick up the shard, but habit pulled me toward it, a need sharper than hunger. The shard flared softly as it caught my reflection. Not of me, but of him. He was already sitting, candle lit, waiting. I lifted it closer, and without hesitation said, "I had a bad day." He couldn't hear, I knew he couldn't. But something in his expression shifted. He wrote quickly, flipped the page toward me. "Please, stay." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My throat tightened. "I'm here," I whispered. He smiled then. Not wide, not theatrical, but the quiet curve of someone who understands. Someone who doesn't need the whole story to share the weight of it. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I didn't feel foolish talking into the dark. I didn't feel like I was unraveling. The shard pulsed, faintly, warm in my hand, as if echoing my heartbeat. I whispered again, softer this time. "Thank you." On his side, he placed his hand flat against the table, palm down. I mirrored the gesture, pressing my fingertips gently to the shard's surface. For a second, just a second, it felt like warmth pressed back. The shard never showed me nightmares. No twisted shapes lurking behind his shoulder, no sudden horrors bleeding through the glass. Only him, his room, the soft glow of his candle. It became my anchor. Each night I'd sit cross-legged on the couch, shard balanced in my palms, and watch as he sketched, read, sipped tea. Sometimes he'd pause, glance at me, and raise a hand in the smallest of waves. I'd wave back, lips trembling with a smile. One evening, I asked the question out loud, though I knew he couldn't hear. "Why me?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he wrote 3 words on his notepad and pressed it against the shard. "Not all reflections." Then slowly he added, "Lonely." The breath caught in my chest. I whispered into the silence, "Me too." That night when I set the shard by my bedside, it didn't go dark immediately. The candlelight on his side lingered, glowing faintly into my room, as though refusing to let the shadows settle. I fell asleep with that warmth flickering at the edge of my dreams. Morning came softer, days blurred, but I carried the shard with me everywhere now. At work, at coffee shops, even on crowded trains. I didn't always look into it, but just knowing it was there kept the edges of the world from cutting too sharply. Weeks passed this way, and though I never learned his full name, never heard his voice, I felt his presence as surely as if we shared the same air. He became a rhythm, a heartbeat on the other side of the glass. One final night, I lifted the shard to find him waiting with a sketch. Not words this time, but an image. 2 candles side by side, their flames leaning gently toward each other. I laughed quietly and set my own candle on the table beside me. I lit it with shaking fingers. The shard glowed brighter, as if pleased. He smiled once. Soft, tired, real. And that was enough. Now the shard rests on my nightstand. No longer a mystery. No longer a threat. When I wake in the quiet hours, it shows only a faint shimmer of light. Steady and gentle. For the first time in years, I don't dread the silence. Because some hauntings don't frighten. Some simply remind you that even across impossible distances, even through broken glass, you can still be seen. And for the first time, the mirror felt less like a scrap, and more like a window.